Nolan, just told me to take care of the house and our child. He said he only married me because he knew I would put up with his affairs. He didn't seem to care that our son was sick. He was drinking beer while I watched in shock. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ruby, and I'm 33 years old. I met Nolan, who's 8 years older than me, on a dating service about 4 years ago. He's successful in his job, but he can be a bit arrogant. He's more outgoing than I am, and I liked that about him. He always praised me for being humble. After we moved in together, I tried hard to live up to his expectations. After dating for a year, Nolan asked me to marry him, and I said yes. He told me he would take care of the money, and he wanted me to manage the house. So I quit my job, and we had a big wedding. He moved into my apartment, and I focused on taking care of our home and him. I didn't mind, and I even stopped working to respect his wishes. My family was happy for us, and my friends were a bit jealous. From the outside, it seemed like we had a perfect marriage. Nolan was successful and handsome, and we had a cute son named Liam. But things started to change after our first anniversary. Nolan was excited when Liam was born, but he started spending more time at work and less time helping with our son. When I asked for his help, he would get angry and say he was too busy with work. He started coming home late, sometimes drunk. I even noticed a different smell on him sometimes. Taking care of our son became harder and harder for me, but Nolan still expected me to give him the same attention as before. One time, I fell asleep while taking care of Liam, and Nolan got mad at me for not doing my job. His words hurt me a lot. The next morning, I saw my husband off, feeling irritated. I continued with my usual routine, waiting for him to come back. But that evening, he came home early and brought up the topic of divorce. He said if I was unhappy, I should apologize sincerely and prove it. Thinking about Liam, I didn't want him to grow up without his dad, so I held back my tears and apologized. That evening, I cried more than I ever had before. Thinking about it later, the only comfort I had was seeing Liam sleeping peacefully. I tried harder to please my husband and take care of our son, but he still stayed out late. He would often remind me that if I wasn't happy, we could split up. I tried to adjust to this new situation, but the exhaustion from taking care of the house and dealing with our issues overwhelmed me. One day, I accidentally fell asleep next to Liam. I was woken up by his crying. Worried, I realized he had a fever, so I rushed him to the hospital. Luckily, it wasn't anything serious, but they suggested he stay overnight for observation. The nurse said I could go home to get some things while they watched over Liam. Reluctant to bother my husband at work, I finally called him, but he didn't answer. I left him a message, grabbed what I needed, and rushed back to the hospital. Liam stayed fussy all day, finally falling asleep around 11 p.m. They prepared a small bed for me, but I couldn't rest or even use the bathroom. As I sipped on some hot cocoa from a vending machine, my phone buzzed. It was my husband, asking where I was. His sharp tone made me nervous. I explained that I was at the hospital with Liam, but he seemed more concerned about his dinner. I tried to keep calm, reminding him that I had left a note and there was food in the fridge, but he was upset that I wasn't at home to make dinner for him, saying it wasn't right for a man to cook. He told me to come home instead of staying at the hospital. I could hear the sound of a beer can opening in the background while he talked. Despite his words, he didn't mind going to the kitchen for a drink. He didn't mention anything about our son, and he wasn't planning to come and get me either. Anger bubbled up inside me as I listened to him start his nightly drinking routine. You want me to leave our son, who's not even a year old, alone here? It's still a hospital, even if it's just for tests. Doesn't it bother you? My voice rose higher than I meant it to, and he sighed in annoyance. Really getting brave because I can't see you. Keep acting like this, and I'll file for divorce. How do you think you'll manage on your own in this economy, with your background and education? It's your job to take care of the home and our kid. This happened because you're slacking off. Not this again. I couldn't hold back anymore. Balancing childcare and household duties had always been tough. But I had believed he truly cared about our family. I ignored his late nights, thinking he was doing it for us. Then I heard another beer can open on his side. Right after he took a sip, he exploded. Are you kidding me? Who do you think pays the bills here? Give me a break. Your only job should be taking care of the house and our child. Then you're done for. Excuse me, women start losing their charm after 30. I won't stay with someone who's past their prime. It's only natural for a guy to want someone younger. I only settled for you because I knew you'd put up with affairs. I was speechless. His hurtful remarks, not entirely because of the alcohol, left me stunned. Then I heard him laugh mockingly. I don't want to be shackled to a family. I had enough to drink, and I'm not hungry. I'm heading to bed. I'll be out tomorrow, so don't call and bother me, okay? If you want to keep this marriage, think about where you stand here. Remember who's putting food on the table. Then he hung up on me. Something inside me broke. Suddenly, everything felt unreal. Seeing that he only viewed our marriage and child as conveniences, all the love I felt for him disappeared. My sadness quickly turned into rage. I couldn't bear that he didn't value our own son. I wasn't the submissive wife he thought he knew. I was determined to make him regret taking a mother for granted. The following day, while Liam was getting his tests done, I reached out to a private investigator. A couple of days later, with Liam thankfully in the clear, we headed home. Predictably, my husband wasn't there to welcome us, and he didn't react to my update about Liam's condition. He'd eventually stumbled home drunk at dawn. I greeted him softly at the door, saying, I've thought about where I stand. Fine, I won't hold it against you this time. Consider yourself lucky. He snorted and made a beeline for the bedroom, leaving a trail of clothes behind. When I picked up his shirt, I noticed what looked like makeup glitter. Suit yourself, I thought. Looking at the man who was just another middle-aged guy now, I started planning my next steps. A month passed, and I was jolted awake by the insistent ringing of the doorbell early one morning. Come on, open up. Why won't my key work? Your husband is back, the voice said. It sounded like Nolan was back from his 3-day trip. I had anticipated his return tonight, but he came back this morning instead. I had my suspicions about it being an actual business trip, but at this point, it was irrelevant. Squinting through my sleepiness, I called his number. Do you mind? It's early, and you're bugging the neighbors. The key is not working. Did Liam mess with it? This is what happens when you're not paying attention. The lock isn't broken, he said. What? That doesn't make sense. I swapped out the locks while you were away, I replied. Peering out from the upstairs window, I could see him standing there, looking completely lost. What on earth did you do without asking me? Who do you think runs this house? I'll divorce you. If you don't want that, then just unlock the door, he demanded. Oh, I've taken care of that, I said calmly. Taken care of what? The divorce. I filed the papers. We're officially strangers now. Hold on. What are you talking about? I never signed any paperwork. I see what you did. You filled it out yourself, huh? That's illegal, and it won't hold up in court. I couldn't help but smirk at his overconfident expression. You've forgotten, haven't you? Remember the time you first mentioned divorce? You brought home a filled-out form. What are you talking about? That's right. On that heart-wrenching day, you came home with a pre-filled divorce form. After my apology, you crumpled it and chucked it at me. I thought you threw it out. I kept it, thinking it might come in handy. In hindsight, I guess I always sensed this day would come. As I reminisced, he looked visibly shaken, mouth wide open. What about this house and our expenses? How do you expect to live, being a stay-at-home mom? Oh, this is so sad. Our young son's going to suffer because of your impulsive choices. Get it straight. Remember, this house came from my grandparents, making me the legal owner. You were just living here. And regarding finances, I landed a job. You're making that up. You couldn't have found a job in this short time. I've been painting in my free time. You always told me not to go to bed before you, so I painted while waiting up for you. After posting my art online, a publisher got interested. Seriously, Is that even possible? Maybe you're getting duped. Artists going viral isn't unheard of nowadays. It's a well-known publisher, I said, watching his reaction carefully. He looked shell-shocked, murmuring, "Is this even real?" It felt refreshing to hear him talk without the usual sarcasm or shouting. "Yeah, I'm all set for now. And on top of that—" "What?" He trailed off, clearly surprised. "There's the spousal support you'll be paying," I informed him. "Say what now?" I opened the window and tossed him the photos I got from the private investigator. "If it was just about you hitting the clubs, I might have let it slide, but you were involved with one of the girls. When I contacted her workplace and the ladies realized they weren't getting sued, they quickly sided with me." He frantically scooped up the photos, his face turning as white as a sheet. I couldn't blame him. The pictures clearly displayed him with a younger woman from the nightlife scene, heading into a shady establishment. "Here's more for you," I said, showing him screenshots of his messages, clear evidence of how he neglected me and our son. As morning broke and people began starting their day, it was evident that he didn't have much ground to stand on with those pictures and messages. "I've been keeping tabs on all your actions and words. I'll hand all this over to my lawyer. You can keep those photos. I've got everything backed up," I declared. "A PI? A lawyer? You think you're pulling this off with my money," he retorted. "It's from my savings before our marriage. Not sure why you'd have a problem with that," I shot back. He stared at me, holding back his anger. "Since our wedding, I've been saving money because he wanted me to be thrifty, so I rarely splurged on myself, leaving most of my savings untouched. Honestly, I was taken aback by how much I had stashed away. I shouldn't have taken action earlier. I'm upset with my past self for being so submissive. Perhaps concerned about nosy neighbors." He tried to smile and softly said, "All right, I understand. I'm sorry. Just let me in. We're still married, right?" I no longer checked the mailbox. He promptly checked it and took out an envelope, inspecting its contents. Inside, there was a key to a storage unit and its location. Everything he owned, all purchased with his earnings since we got married, was stored there. The car was his too now. Kindly, I told him to disappear. I was thankful he never contributed to household chores. It meant I knew where all his belongings were. He probably didn't even know how many shirts he owned. "I can't live without you." His sudden desperation left me unfazed. "I'm fine on my own. Besides, you said I was done for. You're not tied to a fading rose and its seed, are you? Maybe find a younger woman to look after you. Hold on, listen. Moving forward, talk to my attorney. If you linger, I won't hesitate to call the cops. Goodbye." I ended the call, locked all the windows, and shut the blinds. For some time, he incessantly buzzed the doorbell and tried the door. I ignored his barrage of "I'm sorry" texts. When the neighbors started gossiping about his antics, he quickly jumped into his car and left. Later on, I got word from his folks. Turns out, he'd blown all of his personal funds from his single days on nightlife and ended up begging his parents for help. After I laid out the whole story for them, backed by evidence, they gave me an envelope a few days later holding the full alimony they paid for him. I learned he'd been diverting company money for his leisure activities. Given his senior position, once I blew the whistle, he got blacklisted from those venues. His abrupt shift in spending habits raised red flags at his job. While he wasn't fired, he was moved to a smaller role in a distant office. Now he's holed up in a budget apartment. Considering he'd never done any housework, I shuddered to think about the state of his place. But I don't feel sorry for him. He made his bed. Meanwhile, after selling the house and filling in my folks, I moved back home and became an illustrator while also working a side gig at a grocery store. It's not a lavish lifestyle, but I can buy what I want when I wish. My parents have been a rock, and best of all, my son has been thriving with no significant health issues. Recently, he's even expressed a desire to pitch in, which fills me with joy. Even without a dad in the picture, I've promised myself, pointing to where my wedding ring used to be both parents and guarantee my son's happiness.